If you like stories where the truth waits patiently in the dark until the right moment, do me a favor and hit subscribe and leave a like before we begin. And before I tell you how my own son tried to have the police drag me out of the house I built with these two hands, tell me down in the comments what city or town you're watching from. I'd love to know who's listening tonight. My name is Edwin Halloran, and I'm 63 years old. I grew up on a sheep station outside Gore, down in Southland. And I spent 41 years as a roofing contractor in Christchurch before my knees finally said enough. The house I'm going to tell you about sits on a quiet street in Cashmere, looking out across the city toward the Port Hills. I poured the foundation myself in 1987, the year before my son was born. My wife Maeve picked the color of the front door. Sage green, she called it. She said it reminded her of the bush behind her grandmother's place in Westport. Maeve passed away on a Tuesday in late February, 8 months before any of this started. Pancreatic cancer. From diagnosis to her last breath was 11 weeks. I held her hand at Christchurch Hospital, and when the nurse turned off the monitors, the silence in that room was the loudest thing I have ever heard in my life. After the funeral, I came back to the sage green door, and I sat on the step for I don't know how long. The garden she'd planted was still blooming. Her gumboots were by the back door, caked in dirt from the last weekend she'd been strong enough to potter about. I couldn't bring myself to move them. I still haven't. My son's name is Marcus. He's 37, an accountant working for a firm in Riccarton. He married a woman named Priscilla Thorne 9 years ago. They have 2 boys, Oliver, who's 7, and little Henry, who just turned 4. Marcus and Priscilla live in a new build in Rolleston, one of those big places with the open-plan kitchen and the heated tile floors. I'd helped them with the deposit, $48,000 from the savings Maeve and I had set aside. We were proud to do it. That's what parents do, isn't it? You give what you can. For the first month after Maeve died, Priscilla was at my door 3 times a week. She'd bring shepherd's pie or a casserole, sit with me at the kitchen table, ask if I was sleeping. She'd put her hand over mine and say, "Edwin, you don't have to be strong all the time. We're here." And I believed her. God help me. I believed every word. About 6 weeks in, my GP put me on a low dose of Zopiclone to help me sleep. The grief was keeping me awake until 3 or 4 in the morning, and then I'd be useless the next day. The pills helped. They also fogged me up something terrible. I'd take one at 9. And by 1:30, I could feel my thoughts going soft round the edges, like a photograph left out in the rain. It was on a Saturday in late April when Priscilla came over with a folder. Marcus was with her, which was unusual. He'd only been to the house twice since the funeral. He said work was busy. The folder was thick, organized with those little plastic tabs. Priscilla works as a paralegal at a firm in town, so paperwork was her territory. "Dad," Marcus said, sitting across from me at Maeve's kitchen table, "we've been talking, and we're worried about you. I'd taken my pill an hour earlier. I remember the kettle was on. I remember the kitchen smelled like the lavender Maeve used to dry above the stove. We want to make sure you're protected," Priscilla said. She had her hand on my arm. "If something happened, if you had a fall, if you ended up in hospital, we'd need to be able to act quickly, pay your bills, talk to the doctors, make sure the house is looked after." I nodded. It made sense. I was 63. But I felt 80 that morning. "It's just enduring power of attorney," she said. "Standard stuff. Property and personal care. Your solicitor would normally do it." But we thought, why pay him $500 when I can sort it for free? She smiled. Marcus smiled. I signed where she pointed. There were a lot of pages. I read the first one and the second one, and by the third I was getting tired. And Priscilla was so warm, so kind, telling me what each section meant. I trusted her. I trusted my own boy. I signed 7 documents that afternoon. I remember thinking, near the end, that my hand felt like it belonged to someone else. The next 4 months are blurry now, when I look back. I remember Marcus stopping by less, not more. I remember Priscilla calling to say they'd tidied up my online banking so I wouldn't have to worry about the bills. I remember a man coming round to take photos of the house, and Priscilla saying he was a valuer for insurance purposes. I remember a real estate agent's car parked across the road one afternoon, and when I asked Priscilla about it, she said the neighbors must be thinking of selling. I remember, most of all, the morning in late August when I came downstairs and there was a young couple standing in my lounge with a man in a suit. And the man in the suit looked at me and said, "Mr. Halloran, we have a viewing booked for 9. Were you not informed?" I asked him what he meant. He showed me his card. Sotheby's Realty. I rang Marcus. He didn't pick up. I rang Priscilla. She answered on the second ring, and her voice was so calm, so smooth, like she'd been rehearsing. "Edwin, please don't get upset. We've been meaning to talk to you. The house is too much for you on your own, and we've made the responsible decision. You'll be moving in with us. We've got the spare room set up already." I told her I wasn't selling. I told her this was my house. I told her Maeve had picked that front door. She paused. Then she said, "Edwin, you signed the transfer in April. The house is in our names now. We're trying to be kind about this." I sat down on the bottom stair. The young couple in the lounge were murmuring to each other about whether the kitchen needed updating. The estate agent was pretending he couldn't hear me. I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the phone twice trying to get into my contacts. There was a name there I hadn't called in a long time. Dr. Faye Whitcombe. She'd been our family GP since 1996. She'd delivered Marcus. In a manner of speaking, in that she'd been Maeve's doctor through the pregnancy and had held my hand in the waiting room when complications nearly took them both. Maeve and Faye had become friends. Real friends. They'd done a watercolor class together every Wednesday for 12 years. Faye had retired the year before, but she'd kept her cell number the same. I rang her. She picked up on the third ring. "Edwin? Goodness. I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up?" I tried to speak. I couldn't. The sound that came out wasn't words. It was the sound of a man whose foundation had just dropped out from under him. "Edwin, where are you?" "Home," I managed. "But it's not my home anymore. They've taken it, Faye, Marcus, and his wife. They've taken everything." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I'll never forget. She said, "Edwin, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Don't say anything to them about this conversation. Don't tell them you've spoken to anyone. Get whatever you need into a bag and come to my house. Right now. I'll explain when you arrive." I asked her what she meant. She said, "I've been worried about you since April. Maeve made me promise something before she died, and I think it's time I told you what it was." I packed a bag. I left through the back door so the estate agent wouldn't see me go. I took Maeve's wedding ring out of the velvet box on the dresser and put it in my pocket. I took the photograph from her bedside table, the one of us in Akaroa the summer after Marcus was born, and I tucked it into the bag. I drove to Faye's place in Sumner, with my hands shaking the whole way. The sea was gray that morning. The waves were chopping against the seawall. Faye opened the door, and she looked at me for a long moment, and then she pulled me into a hug. She'd known me for nearly 30 years. She knew the man Maeve loved, and she could see that man was breaking apart on her front step. She made tea. She made me drink it slowly. Then she went to her study and came back with a manila envelope, the kind with a string closure, and she set it on the kitchen table between us. "Maeve came to see me 10 days before she died," Faye said. She made an appointment under another name so that no one would see it on the family records. Marcus had been asking her about the will, asking about the house, asking whether you'd be all right on your own. He'd brought Priscilla to the hospice once, and Priscilla had asked the nurse about your medications. Maeve noticed. Maeve noticed everything, Edwin. She always did. I said. She never told me. She didn't want to poison your last weeks with her, Edwin. She wanted those weeks to be peaceful. But she wasn't a fool. She came to me, and she asked me to do 3 things. Faye opened the envelope. She took out a stack of documents. The first thing she asked was for me to write a letter to your solicitor, John Pemberton, recommending that he set up a protective trust for the house in case anything happened to her. He did. The house was placed into the Halloran family trust on the 2nd of February, 2.5 weeks before Maeve passed away. The trustees are myself, John Pemberton, and a man named Russell Aitken, who's a chartered accountant in Tauranga and has known your family since the 70s. I stared at her. But I signed papers in April. I signed transfers. Edwin. She took my hand. You can't transfer a house you don't own. Whatever Priscilla put in front of you was either a forgery or it was something else dressed up to look like a transfer. The house is not, and never has been, in your name to give away. It's in the trust. You're a beneficiary, not the owner. I felt something I can't describe. Relief and rage and grief, all braided together so tight, I couldn't tell them apart. The second thing, Faye continued, was that she asked me to keep records of any visit you made to me or any prescription you were issued, in case there was ever a question about your capacity. I have your full medication record from the day you started Zopiclone. I have my own clinical notes. And I have a letter from Dr. Sutherland, your current GP, dated the 18th of April, 2 days before you signed those papers. Dr. Sutherland and I trained together. Maeve asked him to make a note in your file. The note says that you were on a sedative hypnotic and were in acute grief, and that any legally binding document signed during that period would need to be reviewed for capacity. He stamped it. He signed it. It's been sitting in your medical file for 4 months. I put my head in my hands. I didn't cry. I'd cried so much in the last 8 months that I think my body had simply run out. The third thing, Faye said, very softly, was that she asked me to make sure you knew, when the time came, that she had seen this coming. She didn't want you to think you were a fool, Edwin. She wanted you to know that you weren't betrayed because you were weak. You were betrayed because you were a man who loves his son. There's no shame in that. I sat with that for a long time. Outside, the gulls were calling over the sea. Faye said, "Now, are you ready to take your house back?" I asked her what we were going to do. She said, "We're going to do nothing dramatic. We're going to ring John Pemberton. And we're going to ring Russell. And we're going to ring a detective sergeant I know at Christchurch Central named Jeremiah Tewata. Then we're going to let the law do what the law does. You don't have to scream at anyone, Edwin. You don't have to throw a punch. You just have to sit very still while the truth catches up with the people who tried to outrun it." I rang Marcus that evening. I didn't tell him where I was. I just said I was tired, and I'd like to come to dinner tomorrow at his place to talk about everything calmly. He sounded relieved on the phone. He sounded like a man who thought he'd won. The next evening, I drove to Rolleston. I had a small voice recorder in my shirt pocket, of the kind Faye had borrowed from her son, who's a journalist. New Zealand law allows you to record a conversation you're a participant in without telling the other party. And I'd checked that twice with John Pemberton before I left. Priscilla opened the door. She was in linen trousers and a cream blouse. And she had that smile. That warm, sympathetic smile. I now realized was a tool she used the way a carpenter uses a chisel. The boys ran up to me and hugged my legs. Oliver had drawn me a picture of a kahu, a hawk, and he'd written for Grandad in blue crayon at the bottom. I put it in my coat pocket and told him it was the most beautiful hawk I'd ever seen. After the boys were in bed, the three of us sat in the kitchen. Marcus poured me a glass of red. He wasn't quite meeting my eyes. I said, "I've been thinking about what you both said yesterday. About the house." Priscilla nodded gently. "We know it's a lot, Edwin. But we really do think it's for the best. I want to understand the paperwork," I said. "I'd like to see what I signed in April." Marcus and Priscilla exchanged a look. Just a flicker. But I saw it. "Of course," Priscilla said. "I've got copies in the office. I'll bring them out." She came back with the folder. She walked me through it, page by page. She was very good, patient, reassuring. She showed me a transfer of ownership document with my signature at the bottom. She showed me a deed of gift. She showed me a power of attorney. The signatures were mine, but the dates were wrong. The document she showed me as signed on the 22nd of April had a notary stamp on it, dated the 15th of April, a week before I'd ever seen it. I asked her about that. Calmly. I said, "Priscilla, the stamp is from the 15th, but you said I signed on the 22nd. She didn't blink. "That's just the date the notary stamp was registered, Edwin. It's a clerical thing. That's not how notaries work," I said. Marcus's face changed. He set down his glass. "Dad, don't start. I'm not starting anything, son. I'm asking a question." Priscilla stood up. Her smile had gone. "Edwin, I think you're confused. Maybe you've taken your medication and you're not remembering things clearly. This is exactly why we need to do what we're doing." "Where are my parents' photographs?" I asked. "The ones from the dresser in my bedroom. They were gone this morning." "They're in storage," Priscilla said. "We're staging the house." "Staging it for what?" "For the open home next Saturday." There it was. I let the silence sit on the kitchen for a moment. Marcus looked at the table. I said, "Marcus, look at me." He did. Slowly. "I want to ask you, man to man, are you selling my house?" He said, "Dad, it's our house now, legally. And we've made the decision that's best for the family. And where am I going to live? With us. We've got the spare room. The boys would love to have you closer. It'll be good for everyone." I nodded. Slowly. I sipped my wine. Then I said, "I'd like to see the deed of gift again. I want to read it properly this time." Priscilla's eyes narrowed. "Edwin, I really don't think this is helpful," I said. "I'd like to read it. Or, I'd like to ring my solicitor and ask him to read it. Whichever you prefer." Marcus stood up so fast his chair scraped on the tile. "Dad, stop it. Stop right now. You're not ringing anyone." "I'm not?" "No, you're not." He was breathing hard. "Look, I didn't want it to come to this, but if you keep pushing, I'm going to ring the police, and I'm going to tell them that my elderly father has dementia and is making accusations against his family, and they're going to come and they're going to take you, and you're going to end up in a rest home in Hornby, with a fluorescent light over your bed. Do you understand me?" Priscilla had her arms folded. She was watching me very steadily. "We don't want it to go that way, Edwin. We really don't. But we will protect our family." I put my glass down. I said, "Go on then. Ring them." Marcus blinked. "What?" "Ring the police. Tell them what you just told me. I'd like to hear that conversation." Priscilla said, "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not being ridiculous. I'm telling you to ring them. You said they'd believe you." "Let's see." There was a long, long silence. Marcus didn't move toward the phone. Priscilla's mouth was a thin line. I said, "You won't ring, will you? Because you know what would happen." Priscilla said very quietly, "Edwin, We can sort this out. We don't need to go to extremes. I reached into my coat, and I took out the voice recorder, and I set it on the table between us. The little red light was blinking. This has been on for the last 23 minutes, I said. Everything you've said, including Marcus's threat to have me sectioned, including your admission that you've already booked an open home on a property you do not legally own. Marcus went white. What do you mean, don't legally own? I said, the house is in the Halloran family trust. It has been since the 2nd of February. Your mother put it there before she died. Whatever you put in front of me to sign in April was forged, fraudulent, or both. I have a letter from Dr. Sutherland in my medical file dated the 18th of April, stating I lacked capacity to enter into binding agreements. I have my full prescription record. I have John Pemberton, my solicitor, who has been the trustee for 8 months. I have Dr. Faye Whitcombe, who has known me for 30 years and who has the full documentation. Priscilla sat down. Her face had gone very still. I said, and there's a detective sergeant named Jeremiah Tewata at Christchurch Central, who has been informed of all of this as of 2 o'clock this afternoon, and who is, I understand, currently in possession of the original signed document with the impossible notary stamp date, because Faye delivered a copy of it to him personally at lunchtime. The doorbell rang. I will remember the look on Priscilla's face for as long as I live. Her mouth opened slightly. Her eyes went to the front door, then to Marcus, then to the bench where her phone was charging. She said, "Don't open that door." I stood up. I walked past her, past Marcus, down the hallway. I opened the door. Detective Sergeant Tewata was standing on the porch with a constable beside him. He was a tall man, mid-50s, with a gray mustache and very gentle eyes. "Mr. Halloran," he said, "are you all right?" "I am now," I said. He nodded. "Are your son and daughter-in-law on the premises?" "They're in the kitchen. Would you mind stepping outside for a few minutes, sir?" "My constable will sit with you in the car." I did. I sat in the back of an unmarked Holden with a young constable named Aroha who offered me a peppermint and asked, very kindly, how I was holding up. I could hear voices from inside the house. I could hear Priscilla's voice rising. I could hear Marcus saying, "No, no, no," over and over, the way he used to when he was 4 and didn't want to go to bed. I thought about Maeve. I thought about her sitting in Faye's office, knowing she had only weeks left, and using those weeks not to be afraid for herself, but to be afraid for me. I thought about the watercolor class on Wednesdays. I thought about the sage green door. I thought about Oliver's drawing of the hawk in my coat pocket. Aroha said, "Your wife sounds like she was a remarkable woman, Mr. Halloran." I said, "She was the best person I ever met." She still is. They came out of the house 20 minutes later. Marcus and Priscilla were both in handcuffs, Priscilla in front, Marcus behind. Priscilla was crying. Marcus wasn't. Marcus looked at me as he passed the unmarked car, and his face had nothing in it. Not shame, not love, not fury. Just nothing. Like a window with the curtain drawn. The investigation took 6 months. Priscilla had been the architect of the whole scheme. She'd been in serious trouble with online gambling for nearly 3 years. She owed over $190,000 to a private lender in Auckland and another $60,000 on credit cards and personal loans. The plan had been to sell my house, pay her debts, and pocket the rest. Marcus, for what little it's worth, had not known about the gambling. He'd only known they were in financial strain. He'd told himself he was managing the family's exposure. That's the phrase he used in his statement. Managing the family's exposure. As if I were a tax liability and not his father. Priscilla pleaded guilty to fraud, theft by a person in a special relationship, and forgery. Because of the elder financial abuse element, and because of the scale of the deception, The judge gave her 3 years and 4 months. She'll be eligible for parole at 14 months. The forgery had been done by a man she'd been having an affair with, a former conveyancing clerk who'd lost his license in 2019. He got 2 years and 2 months. Marcus pleaded guilty to being a party to fraud. He was sentenced to 12 months of home detention and 300 hours of community service. He's not allowed to contact me unsupervised for 3 years. The protection order was at my request. The boys live with Priscilla's mother now, a lovely woman named Helen who lives in Halswell and who has been more apologetic to me than she ever needed to be. I see Oliver and Henry every second Saturday. We feed the ducks at Hagley Park, or we go down to New Brighton Pier and look for shells. Oliver asked me once, very quietly, why his mum had to go away. I told him that grown-ups sometimes make choices that have consequences, and that those choices don't change how much we love them, but they do change what happens next. He thought about that for a long time. Then he said, "Granddad, can we still come to your house when I'm older?" I said, "Mate, that house has your name carved into the back of the linen cupboard, where I wrote it the day you were born. It will be yours one day. You and Henry both. I'm 63 years old. I live in the house I built. The sage green door still needs a fresh coat, and I've been telling myself I'll get to it next weekend for about 4 months now. Faye comes round on Wednesdays. We don't paint, but we have tea, and we do the cryptic crossword in the press, and we talk about Maeve. The boys come on Saturdays. The trust holds the house, and when I die, it will pass to my grandsons, with strict provisions that no one, not their mother, not their father, not any new partner of either, can ever touch it. I want to say a few things to whoever is listening tonight. If you are over 50 and you have lost someone, and you are sleeping with the help of medication, please do not sign a single piece of paper without sitting on it for a week. Not a power of attorney, not a will, not a deed of gift, not anything. Grief is a chemical, and so is zopiclone, and so is trust. Mix them together, and you become a man who cannot defend himself. If you have an enduring power of attorney already in place, ring your solicitor this week and ask who the attorneys are and what powers they hold. You may be surprised. If you have a family trust, make sure at least one trustee is independent. A family member as the only trustee is not protection. It is a door with the key already in the lock. If someone in your family suddenly becomes very helpful after a death, very patient, very good with paperwork, very keen to make things easier for you, please do not feel guilty for being suspicious. Suspicion is not betrayal. Suspicion is the price of having something worth taking. And if you are a son or a daughter listening to this, and you have been thinking lately that your widowed parent is a problem to be managed, I want you to stop and go and look at a photograph of yourself when you were small, and look at the hands that are holding you up in that photograph. Those are the hands you are now planning to take from. There is no debt in this world larger than the one you owe those hands. There is also no shame larger than the shame you will carry if you steal what they built. My wife saved my life from beyond the grave. She didn't do it with anger. She didn't do it with confrontation. She did it with paperwork and with friendship and with the simple, quiet faith that she could see further down the road than the people who thought they were smarter than her. She was right. She always was. The notary stamp was dated the 15th of April. That was the date Priscilla forgot to check. That was the thread my wife had already pulled 8 months before, when she walked into Faye's office and asked for help. Every betrayal leaves a date somewhere it shouldn't be. Every lie has a stamp. You only have to know where to look. Thank you for sitting with me through this. If this story meant something to you, leave me a comment with the name of the person who taught you that love and vigilance are not opposites. For me, that person was Maeve. The sage green door is still here. So am I. And so, in every way that matters, is she.